Good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, type in good morning. Good morning, Sonia. What's up, Cameron? Good morning, Hannah. Ritu, good morning. Owen, Stephen. Good morning, my friends. Julia, hi, how are you? Ariana, what is up? Good morning to you too. Perfect. It is. I am glad to be back. It feels like a long time. It feels like a long time. It's been 3 weeks since we last spoke. So that's a very, very long time. And one of the things we don't want is we don't want our muscles to grow cold. But at the same time, it's also nice to let things sink in a little bit. And it's also, I'm sure you have a lot of work. Everyone's busy, right? So it's always, whenever one plate, we don't have to attend to it, we start spinning another plate. I know that's certainly the case for me. My friends, here's what we're doing today. Today, we're spending the bulk of our time starting philosophy of logic. So we're going to be spending 3 weeks all told on logic. The first week is going to be philosophy of logic. And that's not quite logic per se. It's just like, what even is logic, all right? And we'll transition, though, because we do want to eventually do some logic. So starting next week, and even starting today, in a sense, we're going to start doing some logic. But today what we're going to do is we're going to gradually ramp up to this. And for the next 2 weeks after this next entry, because you're going to have an entry due for this class. But after that, we're going to have quizzes, because I want you to actually do some logic. And it's not going to be an entry. Like, you'll have some exercises to do. You'll have some quizzes and stuff. I'll say more about that next week. And you'll have a clearer picture of what to do. But we're going to take this really gradually. But first of all, I want to say a few things about the midterm. And I want to have a look at where we are. And then I want to get a sense of what you've done before, so that I can know what to expect. My expectations is that you've never done any logic before, but nevertheless, I still want to get a lay of the land for the whole class. And then we'll read our packet together. So I've assembled, and this, I have to say, it's really fun to do this, because it's extremely challenging as well, because it's essentially going through thousands and thousands of pages and bringing it down to, like, 6 or 7 pages. And sometimes making Peirce make more sense than he actually does, because he tends to ramble a little bit. God bless him, but and he also tends to go into really technical side issues. And he's real smart, but this is just an undergraduate level course. So what I'm doing is I'm assembling things and trying to make Peirce make sense. And our Peirce packet today will be a lot of excerpts from Logic of the Future, and that's fresh off the press. That came out in 2019. So just to give you a sense of how long it's taking us to even get into print some of his writings. This just came out. And so you folks are benefiting from a lot of arduous scholarship that took, Peirce died in 1914, and we're thinking about his writings in diagrammatic logic are coming out just now. They're still coming out. So it's insane how long it took for us to wrap our minds around that. And so your privilege will actually be reading some of that. So that'll be Peirce Packet 7. And then we'll begin our practice, because there's a lot of hand waving in that. If you don't have a visual accompaniment to that Peirce packet, you'll be like, what is he even talking about? And what we're going to learn today is what he was talking about. So we'll actually practice. And one of the things I want to do today also is use that little gizmo where you get to write on the screen. So stay tuned for that later in the class. We're going to write on the screen. Oh, not all together at once. So it'll be an experiment. You're going to have to work with me on this, because I'd like to do it, like, let's say, one student at a time. But you're going to be involved in writing on the screen today. So that'll be a really neat trick. So does that sound like a good plan? Sound like a good use of our time? If you're good to go, tell me good to go. I'm going to have myself a nice first sip of coffee of the day. I am good to go. Oscar Reese, what's up? Good morning. All right, my friends. So let's start off with the midterm. Holy cow, I'm happy. The midterm was very strong. So just to give you a sense, averages in philosophy courses tend to be around 70 plus or minus 2, so 68 to 72. The class average was 73, which is higher than that bracket. No one failed, which is also rare. No one plagiarized, which is really nice, because when I see plagiarism, I have to fill out some forms, and Papa Bear hates filling out forms. And I was very happy, I have to say, also with the caliber of most of the answers. The highest result, I believe, was 29 out of 30. The lowest result was 15 out of 30, but that's still a pass. And I was concerned because sometimes folks are either absent from class or a little silent. I mean, you get your very vocal group of people who are always there, like the front of the row class people. Like if we were in class, like I have a pretty good sense of who would be right in the front with their arms always up. But I was concerned. I was like, I hope this is going well, right? I didn't know. There's only two ways you can interpret that silence. It's either people are really getting this and they're working hard, or they're not. And my sense is most folks are really solid. Now, you can always do better, and why not, right? And if you made a mistakes, well, in a very Peircean sense, it's no big deal. You just learn from that. But I have to say, I was very happy. If you keep it up for the final, you can't ask for more. Actually, you can ask for more. Let's try to do even better. And so as you've seen also, I grade per question. So just to give you a quick sense of how I grade, your performance on one question does not color how I interpret your performance on another question. And importantly, I don't judge people. I judge performances that are written out. So I'm just judging words and concepts that are strung together in arguments and whatnot. And in this case, I'm judging them for their accuracy and to make sure that they're clear, they're explaining your own words clearly. And if you've actually answered the question. But it was kind of like, I can't stand back and give feedback to the whole class. Like normally I like to say, people didn't understand this particular question. This is a problem area, or, this was a strength. It was kind of out there. Like everyone had their own little mix of strengths and weaknesses. So there's not a single feedback that I can give to the whole class other than just keep it up. Try to repeat and do even better, right? So if you look at one of your answers where you didn't do so well, go over that and figure out for yourself, what went wrong and how you could have done better, and try to do better next time. Obviously, we're moving on, so the questions aren't going to be the same for the final exam, but the final exam is going to be the same format, so there are no more surprises. All right, so now you've done it at least once. My folks, are there any questions about the midterm, or is everything clear? I'm just giving you some feedback and some encouragement, and congratulations, because you earned it. If everything's clear, tell me clear. If you got a question, just ask your question. Arjun, can you unpack that in terms of marks? No, one of the reasons why, so Nav, here's the thing. So Nav asks, would we be able to go over the midterm in today's class? There's a sense in which we could, but we'd be looking back and we're moving forward, right? So if you look at our week-by-week breakdown, let's do the second item on our to-do list here. Let's look at the week-by-week breakdown. We are moving on to other subjects. So if we were to look back, not sure what we would get out of it, right? So we are moving forward. So I don't want to spend time on that because there's not much I can do. Whereas if we can look forward instead to this second half of the class beginning now. So here we are right now, right? Thursday, July 8th. If we can look this direction, right, that can actually affect your results for the final exam. Whereas if we look back, nothing much is going to happen. One of the things I have no problem in doing is giving a little bit of one-on-one feedback to individual students if they want to stick around after class or something like that. I'm happy to do that. But beyond that, I would just rather that we spend those minutes looking forward. Arjun asks, for the midterm, spelling errors meant 1 point deduction, correct, right? No, it's nothing that mechanical, Arjun. It's nothing that mechanical. Let me show you how the questions are graded. And so let me show you that right now. I'm going to put this on the screen for you. All right. Let's see here. You got to share screen. Whoa, excuse me. All right. Share screen. All right. Can everyone see that? It says scale. Yeah. Okay. So, which is not what I want here. All the questions in the midterm were worth 10%, right? So here's how they're graded. Let me zoom in as much as I can. Just make sure that that fills up as much of the screen on the big blue button here, right? Essentially, if it's out of 10 points, and I keep it out of 10 points because it's easy to wrap my mind around, because it's reflective. It looks much, by analogy, much closer to a scale out of 100, right? There are 2 tiers, right? There's the correct answers. Can everyone see when I select something? Does it all turn in blue? Can everyone see when I select something? Good. All right. So this is a correct answer. So there's 6 varieties of correct answers: 10 points, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5, right? And there are 4 varieties of incorrect answers. So 4, 3, 2, 1. So long as you wrote something, you can't get 0 in my exams. You show up, you write a full English sentence, right? And you turn in a PDF. That got the lowest you could possibly go is 1 point. The cutoff point between these 2 tiers, so correct answer, right, in 6 varieties, and incorrect answer in 4 varieties, is the pass-fail cutoff point. And basically, it's the following question, right? Is this answer right or wrong, right? I mean, if it's wrong, right, and you wrote beautifully, it's still wrong. And so if it's right, I ask myself, could this have been written by someone who didn't take the course? Because you could luck out on something, right? If it looks like it's just BS, right, you're going to be over here at 4 points out of 10. No one, I mean, I don't think anyone got that, at least not frequently, because no one failed the actual midterm, right? And so what you get for 4 points is wrong, but at least it was well written and developed, or right, but it was so vague and with general platitudes, like the kind of stuff that, you know, your friend could have sat in for you and just made stuff up, right? And so that's a beautiful, you know, incorrect answer is still an incorrect answer, right? 5 points would be something like, enough intelligible things were said to pass, but barely. Like, you know, it's just clearing the bar. It's still correct. You answered the question. You said what I asked you to say, but you know, wow, it's the details are thin on the ground. The bookends are really easy. 10 out of 10 is perfect, complete, clear, and nothing to criticize, right? So I grade these things twice over, and that means that on the second time I grade them, really, even if I try, I can't, even if I were to nitpick, I can't find anything to complain about, right? I'm really, really happy with that. And there's nothing wrong with it. Look, it's a 10 out of 10. And you get those, right? Some people have gotten them. It's a thing. It's not a problem. 9 would be almost perfect, but there are some omissions. Like there's a few things you should have mentioned, right? So for instance, let's say, for example, there was a question talking about how the ideas in Peirce's philosophy of science relate to his ideas in his theory of knowledge and in his epistemology. One of the crucial ideas that should have shown up would have been, for instance, the idea of a habit, which is what for Peirce a belief is. It just is a habit. And habits are also what glue together the different parts of the science, especially when it comes to a convention. So the conventions have to be habituated, right? So that's what crossover. Let's say someone, that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And let's say that wasn't there, but everything else was. That would have looked like a 9. Right, something like that. So it's really easy for me to grade. The first division is this the correct answer or the incorrect answer? Right, that's the am I going to be going in the upper floor here or in the lower floor? Am I going to be exploring varieties of pass or varieties of fail? Is it a bookend? Right, these have to be clearly, like this has to be clearly horrible to get a 1 out of 10, and it has to be clearly perfect to get a 10 out of 10. Right, these are also easy to get. These 2 here, 5 and 4. You know, 5 is like, yeah, I'll give it to you, but man, that's barely passed. 4 is like, it's wrong, but you read beautifully. Or, you know, yeah, you kind of got it, but you got it by luck. You can tell you're just, you know, making a word salad of stuff that anyone could have written, and you happened upon the right answer, but not really. And most of the time I'm spending, you know, I'm looking at this, right, somewhere in that range. And that's not a perfect science, right? But it's pretty accurate. Like if you were to line up all the 8 answers compared to all of the 6 answers, you know, you'd see that difference. And that's how I grade, right? That's the scale for that 1 to 10, right? And those add up to what they are. And I do that per question based on what is written. And it's fairly, once I'm confident with my judgment, were I to have the text next to me, it's very easy to defend why it got what it got. But Arjun, it is not a question of like, I don't have a grading rubric that's so precise that I say, you know, 1 mark for mistakes and whatnot, like spelling mistakes. And you can still get 10 out of 10 for a spelling mistake, by the way. Like if there's 1 or 2 tiny little mistakes, it's not a big deal. Which actually does, I do have one thing I want to say for the whole class. It just reminds me, holy cow, people, spell Peirce's names right. Like I saw so many spelling mistakes. Like you're taking a course on Peirce. Spell it right. It's P-E-I, not P-I-E. All right. So like I saw a lot of that. It's like that's one, it's a dumb little thing. Yeah, P-E-I. Oh, that's a good Prince Edward Island, right? P-E-I. So everyone's going to remember that. That's clever. I didn't even realize that. So that's a good mnemonic aid, right? So P-E-I, Prince Edward Island, one of our provinces. Please spell Peirce right. Yeah. Yeah. No. Arjun's right. That helps. I'm not attributing my errors to something trivial when it's a larger problem. No. Don't worry about that. Like I'm not that anal. Like if I see a lot of mistakes, that's going to affect clarity, and clarity matters. And you ought to proof this stuff. And you're not helping yourself, But mistakes happen in a very Peircean sense. You don't need to be perfect to get 10 out of 10. And if you were to go over all of the exam copies and see answers that got 10 out of 10, occasionally they'll have a little typo. It's not the end of the world. So I'm not that mechanical. If this was an essay that was graded out of 100, I'd have a much more detailed rubric. But you have to grab a grading scale that's commensurate with the nature of the sort of the focus level that you're able to attain. I'm only grading the equivalent of 8 lines. So let's not get crazy about this. I can't have a grading rubric that has like, 40 different little, rows and columns for something that's 6 or 8 lines long as far as an answer, right? That would make no sense. So it's pretty coarse grained, but it matches the nature of the answer. Arjun, does that answer your questions? Does that deal with your concerns? Yeah, and the same goes for the entries. You can get 5 out of 5 if it's less than perfect, but there's a point at which it's just like anything else. A point at which you keep removing grains of sand from the heap, it becomes not a heap anymore, right? So if those problems start to add up. All right, so what are we doing? So here we are. That's our week by week breakdown. The next 3 weeks are going to be on logic, and we're going to gradually ramp by doing philosophy of logic today. So this is the stuff that we'll be looking at today. We'll read the Peirce packet today. And notice that based on today's class, you're going to owe me an entry sometime before next class on July 15th. When I mean before next class, I don't mean on a Thursday morning, right? So please be smart about this. That's a recipe for disaster. Take your time, write this well, and turn it in sometime in the next 4 or 5 days. That's the smart thing to do. After that, though, it's no longer entries. It's going to be for 2 weeks. We're going to have quizzes. So quiz A and then quiz B. And these will be online, and these will be held at the end of class. So we'll have philosophy of science, and at the end of class, we'll have a short quiz. And I'll log off. I'll give you some instructions. It'll be on Moodle. And it'll be a set time and a set amount of time for you to work on these, and I'll say more about that. And you're going to do some logic. So all of the stuff that we're beginning to learn today, and especially next week when we learn what the heck all of this stuff is, that's going to be to help you on this. So if I were to make these arrows correctly, the Peirce packet, right? That's the arrow. Let me make a fat arrow here so we can all see, right? What we're doing today, just to be ultra clear, is dealing with philosophy of logic. It involves the Peirce packet 7, and it's going to output as your 5th entry, so written in or normal English. However, and I'm going to use another color for this, the arrow in purple here, after this week, so for the next 2 weeks after that, we're going to be doing logic. So we're not going to be actually using much English anymore, and that's going to output as your performance on 2 quizzes spread evenly and each worth 5%. Is that clear, everyone? If it's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask a question. So just so we have a clear blueprint, because things will be a little different, right? Because it makes no sense to keep writing regular English prose about logic beyond a certain point, because we're going to be manipulating these different diagrams and stuff, and I want you to learn these skills. And then after that, we'll do philosophy of science. And there's a reason why, once again, all of these branches are structured in the way that they're structured, because hopefully the ideas keep building on each other. I do know what I'm saying as far as I anticipate what I'm going to be saying, and then I prepare the ground for that. So for instance, today, let me clear all this clutter. Today we'll be talking very briefly about 3 different kinds of inferences, that's going to help us for philosophy of science later on. So we're not going to go into a ton of detail into that, but that's just something we're going to flag and keep going. And it's also what we're doing today in philosophy of logic is going to be building on all the stuff that we did prior. So everything that happened above over here, right, when we were doing the first half of the class. All right. And once again, this all looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics to you right now. These are all words you're not familiar with, but by the end of the class, you'll be able to cross all those items and have learned all this. Good. All right, so we talked about the midterm. I said, amazing, keep it up. We looked at where we are. We're mindful of the fact that starting next week, things are going to start looking a little different. We're going to move away from normal language. We're about to do some philosophy of logic, but before we do that, answer yes or no. Have you ever taken Philosophy 1150 before? And that's Introduction to Formal Logic. If you have, say yes. If you have not, say no. Okay, cool. Try to take it with me, by the way. Those of you who didn't, I always pride myself on teaching well. But I'm very happy with the way I teach logic. Who's taken logic with me here before? If you have, say yes, that you've taken it with me before. I know Julia has. I know that Andrew has. Some people, it's been a while. Julia is even, I think, the only person in this class. She's actually done existential graphs, the stuff we're going to be doing for today and next week. She's got a little bit of an advantage. She's actually done that. One time when I was teaching logic and in her group, in her cohort, I did some existential graphs, so they did that. I'm not teaching any classes next semester now, so it's a non-teaching term. And Lord knows I need it because I'm chair of the department and I've got lots and lots of things to do. Plus, I also do research and I'm expecting a new child. So luckily, that's my non-teaching term for the year. So we teach 8 courses maximum per year. And that's going to be my my teaching terms. Thank you. I feel like a farmer raising like little kids. You know, it's my 4th one. And so we're getting into new territory as you get the numbers of the family get larger and larger. You know, people look at you weirder and weirder, right? But it's as much work as it is of much reward, man. It's like, holy cow, every day I'm burnt out and they tire me out. But also every day I'm like, this is the most significant and meaningful thing I could ever have done, you know? So yeah, but yeah, that's going to happen. My partner's going to be delivering during the my non-teaching term, which is great because we'll certainly be needing a little flexibility. Non-teaching terms don't mean I don't work. They just mean I have a little more flexibility on how I do my things. Plus I do more service. I'm more meetings and emails and all that crap. So plus I've got lots of work that I do also. Remember, I write articles and books and stuff. So I'm very, very busy. So now I'm not teaching that. I will be probably teaching 1 course in the winter term. And that's probably going to be another section on sustainability, which I often teach for the policy studies program. Unfortunately, I'd like to teach this new course that I built called Thinking Philosophically About Technology by Watching Films, Philosophy 1201, which is a new course that I developed. But the soonest I'm probably going to be able to offer and hold that one is going to be in the summer term. So yeah, it's unclear. So it looks to me like, and that's going to be an amazing class. Just you wait, like no textbooks. We just watch sci-fi movies. Yeah, that's going to be insane. And I built that one to be like a really sexy class to hook all students and get them addicted to philosophy. I look it up, Philosophy 1200. Sorry, 1201. That's a new course. And that got approved and I had to do a ton of paperwork to get that happening. But if you like, you know, science fiction movies and you watch things like Westworld and you're philosophically inclined and you think, what the hell, you know, AI and all that stuff, that's going to be such a crazy class. And I work in a field called robot ethics, so I publish in that field, and it's a vibrant subject matter. All right, so now my sense is that people here is a mixed bag. I've got, I think, roughly speaking, and I was tracking the yeses and the nos, you know, informally. Roughly, it looks like maybe 40% of the class has taken logic before, and about 60 haven't. Which is kind of cool because remember my ramp is going to be gradual, like super gradual. I'm not going to assume anything. I'm going to start from the very beginning, and Peirce will as well. And so do know though that by the end of today's class, we're gradually going to let go of language which is a sign, a symbol, in virtue of other signs, icons, and we're going to see why. All right, so let's read the Peirce packet 7 together. Is everyone good to go for the Peirce packet? If you're good to go, tell me good to go. Grab myself some food, because I'm looking at a lot of work ahead of me. Let me stretch. Now remember these Peirce packets. I give them a little subtitles because, just to be clear, I reconstruct them. And just to remind everyone, these things here, it's not just a gibberish. It's this would mean Logic of the Future, Volume 1, page 471. So if you ever want to find the original source, remember it's all available to you on Moodle. I put every single electronic primary source that I can find on electronically, like as a PDF, on Big Blue Button. So you have not all of Peirce's writings, but you also have links to his manuscripts. So if you wanted to see the whole thing, you could click on those links and see all, 140,000 pages of them, as crazy as it is. So Peirce would like to teach you something. And remember, Peirce is addressing to you. So remember the very first reading, the very first Peirce packet, it was Peirce was talking to you. He's going to talk to you again now. He's really addressing you. I have written my philosophical ideas down, but I have no itch at all to go into print, and never will do so until I have gone over the subject so many times and have elaborated so clear an idea of it that it seems a great pity that it should not be recorded. It's always anywhere from 5 to 20 years from my first having written the matter out. Of course, I don't speak of newspaper contributions, though I sometimes have these standing in type for months before I will consent to their going to press. This is because I know of the castigation that is coming to me from myself. For no sooner is the paper out that I set to work to raise all the objections I possibly can, both of the trifling kind and of the dynamite kind. And the result has always been that I have found that there were other men who were far better satisfied with them than I myself have been. The truth is that I am far too well acquainted with the depths of my own stupidity to know what it is to be satisfied with any product of my mind. I put that in because it's a statement of fallibilism, and it gives you a nice window into Peirce's humility, right? The writer is an aged man, so near the tomb that it is quite out of the question that he should gain any substantial good from anything that he might write. But all his life long, he has been pondering one question that concerns every rational being of every kind. Now, the result of the study has been to assure the writer of certain truths of practical importance for everyone. It is to the very young that my findings will be particularly addressed. That's you. Since among these are those whose habits of reasoning are not yet fixed and who are destined to become the reasoners of a more advanced generation. Later on, we're going to watch videos of macaque monkeys. And at that point in the video, you'll see how the young macaque monkeys tend to learn better than the old ones. And that's you. If nobody ever reads what I've set down, it goes virtually unuttered. In other words, if it be uttered, it is interpreted by a reader. And to this hypothetical reader, I say, remember when he was writing this, he didn't know if it would ever be read, but it has a kind of a placeholder for an interpretant. And now we're actually actualizing that potential interpretant. And now he says to this hypothetical reader, you and I say, you necessarily know the English language, which implies a certain likeness between your mind and mine. Not only that, but you and I inhabit the same world and are acquainted with many of the same things in it. Whether directly or indirectly does not much matter. Each of us well knows that the other has this common ground of experience with himself. Each knows the other knows it. Each knows the knows that he knows it. Sorry, there must be some sort of mistake there. Each knows the other knows he knows the other knows it, and so on infinitely. I will term this endless series of knowings a mutual understanding. So Peirce and you have a mutual understanding. These two facts then, our mutual understanding and two, your understanding of the dialect I employ, render it certain that when I assert something, that is, endeavor by my utterances to induce you to recognize it as true, you will, if not invariably, at least sometimes, know what it is to which I intend to bring you to assent, that is, to agree. Peirce would like to teach you his system of logic called existential graphs. Well, what is this thing anyway that I propose to teach you? Why is it nothing but a particular way of making a diagram to express any fact that one says or imagines is true? This particular way of expressing what might be said in ordinary language is called the system of existential graphs. It is a system of logic. Logic is the art of reasoning. The science of logic is largely, not wholly, one of rearrangement. Reasoning is the process by which we attain a belief which we regard as the result of previous knowledge. The belief to which an inference leads is called the conclusion. The beliefs from which it sets out are called the premises, sometimes written premises with two S. The fact that the premises necessitate the truth of the conclusion is called the consequence, or following of the conclusion from the premises. To say that one idea deliberately produces another is to say that that habit is a conscious one and is accepted as a satisfactory habit. In other words, the habit is a belief, which is true or false, satisfactory or unsatisfactory. For what can importance mean except an influence upon human conduct, bodily or mental? There are three, and only three, essentially different kinds of reasoning, which I shall distinguish by the names deduction, induction, and retroduction. By deduction, I mean any reasoning which will render its conclusion as certain as its premises, however certain these may be. So the hallmark of deduction is certainty. By induction, I mean a reasoning which provisionally concludes something to be true of every member of a collection, or more frequently, of whatever there may be of a definite general kind, for no other reason than that, firstly, the same thing has been found to be true of a part of that collection, or of a finite collection of things of that kind, and secondly, that the manner in which this partial collection has come to be known, to have the character which is concluded to belong to the whole, compels, or at least authorizes, us to regard it provisionally, approximately, probably, as an image of that whole. So induction, so let's just pause and recap. Deduction, right, is when you have an argument. An argument is a movement from premises to a conclusion, when the argument is certain. That is, the truth of the conclusion is as strong as the truth of the premises. Now, the premises might be false, right? But the passage from the premises to the conclusion itself is certain. So that's what characterizes deduction. On the other hand, induction, which is another kind of inference, another kind of movement from premise to conclusion, right, is probable. It's a probable form of reasoning. And the obvious case of it would be like statistics. When you have a greater sample, you can't study the whole. You have a greater population, you can't study the whole population. So you study a subset, a smaller sample, and then you infer that what you got from the sample stays true of the whole. So for instance, if I dig in the polar ice caps and I analyze the ice, I assume that what I've discovered about the part that I dug, that little kind of hole that I bore into the ground, that's representative of the greater polar ice caps. So I go from part to whole, but of course that's a probable inference because I haven't actually dug and checked the entire polar ice caps. So far so good with deduction and induction. These should be somewhat familiar to you if you've taken some philosophy. Is that reasonably clear? If it's clear, type in clear. Who's heard about these terms before? If you have heard about them before, say yes, and if you haven't, say no. Just so I get a sense. Okay, so there's less familiarity with these things than I thought. Okay, that's neat. I did not know. Well, we'll rediscover these things. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on that, but we'll rediscover these things when we do philosophy of science. So we'll unpack these things. Now, normally, if you learn about these distinctions, there's two. There's deduction and there's induction. So deduction is certain, induction is probable. But Peirce was a pioneer in discovering another form of inference that he called retroduction or abduction. And by retroduction or abduction, I mean that kind of reasoning by which, upon finding ourselves confronted by a state of things that, taken by itself, seems almost or quite incomprehensible or extremely complicated, if not very irregular, or at least surprising, we're led to suppose that perhaps there is, in fact, another definite state of things, because though we do not perceive any unequivocal evidence of it, nor even a part of it, or independently of such evidence if it does exist, yet we perceive that this supposed state of things would shed a light of reason upon the state of facts which we are confronted, rendering it comprehensible, likely if not certain, or comparatively simple and natural. Sorry for the bad writing, that's him. Now, I've written in plain English here, abduction is essentially guessing, right? Peirce was the first to point out that it's vital that we have moments in our mental life where we just guess, right? Otherwise, you can't just keep moving certainly and probably from premises. You have to introduce new material into that stream by just guessing. Something happens, what's the likeliest cause of it? You don't have any reason to think this, so it's the weakest form of inference. The first form of inference, deduction, is certain. The middle form of inference, induction, is probable. And the weakest form is called abduction. And you have really no good grounds to believe the conclusion, but you have to because it's indispensable. Otherwise, you couldn't get started. You have to guess. You hear a loud noise, you have to guess what it was. So let's say you hear a bang outside. You think could have been a firecracker, or it could have been a gun or something like that. You're guessing. It's a guess. You have no choice. Just as the fish or the bird know by nature how to coordinate the efforts for swimming or for flying, and just as many insects know where and how to dispose of their eggs, so as best to ensure they're producing new individuals, although they can have no experience pertinent to such talk, so man by nature has a power of guessing at the truth which he has not yet experienced. And therefore, although we know that we cannot always guess right, yet it would be the height of folly to hesitate to accept, provisionally, any cognition which we feel an inward impulse to accept, while never losing sight of the possibility of its being false. So we have to guess. We are confronted with surprising phenomena that trigger inquiry because of real doubt. And when that happens, we don't always have the luxury of doing a probable inference from generalizing from past instances. Sometimes we have to just guess. And that guess is the beginning of a test that you could run out in the world, and that test could prove right, it could prove wrong, but you have to be able to start. We'll see all of these ideas. I'm going to keep moving on. The reason why I put that tripartition there is because, having made this distinction between three kinds of inferences, we shall henceforth be concerned solely with deductive logic, which forces us to proceed slowly, cautiously, and sometimes circuitously. So just to clarify, the three kinds of inferences: certain, probable, and sheer guessing, deduction, induction, and abduction. The reason why I make that distinction in this reading is because we want to be clear where logic is going to happen. Logic is going to happen at the level of deduction. And deduction is going to be the quest to discover a way to move certainly from premises to a conclusion. From the stuff you know, or at least you think you know, to the conclusions you can draw from the things you know. Now, when doing logic, one must not complain if what is said is a mere truism. It will be found that by piling truism upon truism, we arrive at last at deeply interesting and important results. And we're going to do some logic today. So those of you who've never done logic and for whom all of this feels a bit cryptic, it'll all fall into place, I promise you, as the course wears on today. Logic supposes that some opinions or thoughts are unsatisfactory and liable to require replacement. They will not stand, while others, if not perfectly satisfactory, are at least relatively so. Error is but too well known to us, while some truths we have never been tempted to suspect. At any rate, in the formal part of logic, which passes by the inquiry into the truth of facts and confines itself to the business of tracing their connections, we certainly must assume that this is so, for without some propositions that are taken as premises, there can be no such science as logic. So logic only works if there are some things you take to be true. Could be wrong, but you take them to be true. And what do you do then? You trace the relations between all of the things you take to be true. So if you were to sit down and you write a whole list of all the things you take to be true, of course, whether or not they're true is a matter of correspondence. You check with the world. The world is the way your beliefs describe it to be, or it isn't. Or, but when we do logic, we're not concerned with correspondence, we're concerned with coherence between the ideas. So we're not so much concerned with what is true and what is false, but rather, if something were to be true, what sort of conclusions could we draw from it? In the next place, it is supposed that there is some general formal rule by which erroneous opinions or some class of erroneous opinions may be avoided. For that is what logic is. For logic supposes not only that there is error, but also that error is in a measure avoidable, and further, that there is some general rule or method by which it can be avoided. This is really important. That's what we're going to learn today. You can make mistakes, right? But it's avoidable. You can avoid those mistakes of reasoning. And furthermore, we can actually teach that. There's a method that I can pass along so that you can think better. In reasoning, one is obliged to think to oneself. In order to recognize what is needful for doing this, it is necessary to recognize, first of all, what oneself is. One is not twice in precisely the same mental state. One is virtually, in other words, for pertinent purposes, the same as if one were, a somewhat different person to whom one's present thought has to be communicated. Consequently, one has to express one's thoughts so that that virtually other person may understand it. So when you're going to reason, you're going to basically address your future self. And you're going to address your future self as if that future self is like another person. And you're going to submit to that future self that what you're saying is correct. And your future self is going to actually evaluate whether or not what your past self said is correct. And that's what thinking is. It's the movement through time of addressing oneself to one's future self. And of course, there's no difference between addressing your future self and addressing another person. So it's ultimately a public thing. A logical notation is a system of signs by which, if it is perfect, any proposition can be expressed. And there are certain rules, that is, statements of conditions under which certain transformations of the expressions are permissible. And this body of rules is so complete that any proposition that can be necessarily deduced from the propositions originally expressed can be obtained by a skillful employment of these rules of transformation. We'll see today exactly what that is. And again, I want to flag those of you who are completely unfamiliar with logic, and even those of you who are, I strongly recommend you reread this packet after we've done 1 or 2 weeks of logic. You'll like, it's true, I understand what he meant. The principal business of logic is to ascertain whether given reasonings are good or bad, strong or weak. In this regard, whether we think our propositions in one form or in another is of no more consequence than whether we express them in English or in German, whether we write them or enunciate them, whether we drawl or gabble. Accordingly, logicians need not be biased by the usage of any languages. They will instead do best to take the forms which are the most convenient for their own purpose, of tracing the relationship of dependence of one fact and another. So remember, he starts off by saying, you and I must have at least one thing in common. You must be reading English because I'm talking to you in English and it's making you some sense. Okay, fair enough. But we have there's no reason why we have to confine ourselves to that. We can construct a language to suit our purpose, to try to aim for a system of logic where any proposition can be expressed, and one that is so complete that any proposition can be necessarily deduced from the propositions originally expressed. That's the goal. Let's make up an artificial language in which we can think more clearly. Now, as you know, a sign is a thing which serves to convey knowledge of some other thing, which it is said to stand for or represent. Every reasoning consists in interpreting a sign. For whenever we think in signs. If you're addressing your future self, the baton that you pass, does everyone know the relay race? Does anyone know that? A relay race in the Olympics, you run like 400-meter relay race, like everyone runs 100 meters, they pass a baton? Yeah. Think of thinking as a relay race that never ends, that have no beginning and has no end. And there's you that passes the baton to the next you, that passes the baton to the next you, that passes the baton to the next you, and so on and so forth. And obviously the baton is what? It's a sign. You make a sign, you interpret the sign, you create a further sign, you interpret that sign, and it's a relay race between different moments of you through time. And that's what reasoning is. Every action of thought is either the formation or the application or the interpretation of a sign, or else it is some other kind of action upon a sign or signs. Those who tell us that thought needs language are so far right that man's speech is man's distinctive vehicle of thought. But every mathematician and every logician will tell the linguists that they're in the possession of quite other systems of science into which they're accustomed to translate words and forms of words, and so to render them more intelligible. One such system, equivalent to a syntax and of great utility for logic, is briefly described in this volume. It is called the system of existential graphs. It is the simplest possible system that is capable of expressing with exactitude every possible assertion. So that's quite the boast. That's a big advertising, and that's what we're going to learn together. The simplest possible system of science that is capable of expressing with exactitude every possible assertion. Existential graphs is a diagrammatic logic. In contrast with symbolic logic, existential graphs is a system of diagrammatic logic. A diagram is a kind of icon that's particularly useful in logic because it suppresses a quantity of details and so allows the mind more easily to think of the important features. It is only in respect to the relations of the diagram's parts that their likenesses consist. So let's imagine, for instance, right, that I'm going to make a diagram for you, a very brief one. Let's imagine that I tell you that when we ate at supper the other day, I was sitting at the head of the table. My two youngest sons were here, my oldest one was here, and my partner was there. That was our relation to one another. Do these purple dots resemble myself and the members of my family, yes or no? The purple dots, do they resemble, are they icons of my family? Do I look like a purple dot? I don't look like a purple dot. But this sign, this purple dot right now, stands for me in virtue of my having told you so. So what kind of sign is the purple dot? I just told you so. I've just arbitrarily instituted a code. I said, look, by convention, this purple dot stands for Mark. And these purple dots stand for what kind of sign? We have three kinds, remember? Icons, indices, and symbols. You got it. It's a symbol. So these purple things are symbols. They represent the members of my family just because I told you so. If I wouldn't have told you so, you'd look at these purple signs and you'd be like, what does that stand for? What even is that? It's not obvious. You could look at this for a million years, and unless you're privy to the code that tells you, oh, these are supposed to represent members of Mark's family, you would never realize. You think they're grapes. There may be icons of grapes. Oh, and do you agree? This sign vehicle is an icon of a grape. It does bear a true relation to grapes. As low resolution as it is, they do truly are. There are icons of grapes, but they are symbols of my family. So let's put that. That's a great observation, Owen. These purple dots are icons of grapes, but symbols of my family. We agree on this? Say agree if you agree. Just want to go along. Just want to make sure everyone's taking it step by step. Now, I'm going to use a different tool for this, though. All right. Let's use blue. Let's make this really sharp. Now, I told you, though, that this is supposed to track the spatial arrangements of my family at the dining table last night. The part in blue, the relations between these things, right? And I suppose there are relations going this way as well. You can learn from this, right? Who I could see head on. So I was at the head of the table here, so I could see by all of these relations between these things, right? Those relations, the lines in blue, those are icons of the way the world was structured last night in my kitchen. Those lines truly resemble, they truly bear a shared quality, right, with the way things were arranged, even if the nodes between the arcs, that is the purple dots that are being connected by the blue arcs, the blue lines, right, those nodes are purely conventional. The structure of those different conventions hangs in a way that is iconic. So if I were to write in purple and blue here, I'm going to write, because I'm color coding it, right? Everything in blue is an icon, and everything in purple is a symbol. It bears a relation to something in the world, namely what? It bears a relation to Mark and his family. So here's little people, that's me. And here's little people, right? I'm going to make little icons now because I can't actually bring the actual people there, right? And we were sitting at some table, right? This is a sign of what happened in my kitchen, but it bears different kinds of relations. The purple parts relate to the relata by convention, and the blue parts relate to the relations between the relata by similarity, right? Now let's read the passage again. A diagram, right, is an icon only in respect. Sorry, let me underline that a bit better. A diagram is an icon. Let me grab my underline tool. Only in respect to the relations of the diagram's parts. So it is only in respect to the relations of the diagram's parts that their likenesses consist. So you have arbitrary elements, but the relations of those arbitrary elements, right, those bear a likeness to whatever it is that they represent. Can everyone see that? Does he understand? Is that clear? Does that make some sense? That's what a diagram is. A hybrid of convention and similarity. The similarity is in the relations that it's trying to represent, but the things being related themselves are purely conventional, right? What we're going to be using is this kind of sign. So we'll see what's going to be iconic are going to be the logical relations between the ideas, and we'll have some symbols. So bear that in mind. By the end, in about like 25, 30 minutes, it'll start to make sense even more. Because we need to illustrate all this stuff. I promised you that we'd have to do some practice. Contemplation consists in using our self-control to remove us from the forcible intrusion of other thoughts. And we're going to do that today. We're going to concentrate by blocking out all sorts of noise. In all reasoning, there must be something amounting to a diagram before the mind's eye. And the act of inference consists in observing a relation between parts of the diagram that had not entered into the design of its construction. So essentially, logic is the science of scrutinizing diagrams and making discoveries about the hidden relations that we had not noticed within the diagram. I shall thus show the reader how much reasoning is dependent upon graphical signs. By graphical, I mean capable of being written or drawn so as to be spatially arranged. It is true that one can argue out loud, but I do not believe one can go very deeply into any important and considerably large subject of discussion without space serving as the field of representation. The system of existential graphs is thus essentially different from language. Namely, instead of being merely protracted in time, its expressions are diagrams upon a surface, and indeed must be regarded as only a projection upon that surface of a sign extended in 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions are necessary and sufficient for the expression of all assertions, so that if man's reason was originally limited to the line of speech, which I do not affirm, it has now outgrown the limitation. Here are instructions on how to start building existential graphs. You are to take a piece of paper and call one side of it the sheet of assertion, for that is the name by which I shall call it. Perhaps I should have done better to call it the sheet of affirmation, since whatever state of things you represent on this page, you will be understood to affirm as existing somewhere. That is why existential graphs are called that way, because whatever you put on the sheet, you claim exists. The sheet of paper used is understood to relate to a universe or body of experiences common to the writer and the reader. and anything significant written upon this sheet without being enclosed in an oval is asserted of that universe, or, so far as it is indefinite, of some suitably chosen individual of that universe, so as to make the clause of the proposition show as true. Again, when you reread this after today's class, it'll make sense because we're actually going to need to illustrate all this. A blank sheet involves us in no responsibility. By contrast, we're going to use visible marks upon a surface as our symbols, and we'll pretend to hold ourselves responsible for, that is to assert, the perfect conformity to our purpose of whatever proposition we write upon it. To assert a proposition which you take to be true, you may use any shapes that can be drawn or written or partly drawn and partly written, provided they be not among those to which fixed meanings are attached in this exposition, and may give them such significations as you like. So you can use whatever you want. There'll be a part that's purely optional, but then you keep your conventions constant. Any shape or combination of shapes that put on the sheet of assertion would be an assertion. I term a graph, and your act of putting it on any surface by writing or drawing or a mixture of the two, I express by saying that you scribe that sign on that area. So scribing is this verb for what it is to do. I'll say all this stuff when we actually practice in a moment. Those are the technical jargon. So it's a graph, and you scribe a graph when you write it, and you scribe it on an area, which is the place where you put it. And the result of doing so, that is any single one among the inexhaustible multitude of possible embodiments of the graph, I call a graph instance. So what we saw earlier on the sheet was a graph instance. What I drew, that's what that was. The chosen symbols are written on the surface of the paper, wherein it is assumed that a surface is capable of representing every logical relation, that the surface must be capable of iconically representing every logical relation. Any line you may draw that shall be fine, not thick, and that simply returns into itself so as to have no extremity, in short, an oval, and having a graph or graphs enclosed within it, is called a cut. I will call the graph that is enclosed in any even number of times an evenly closed graph, and a graph that is enclosed any odd number of times an oddly enclosed graph. I'm going to skip this one page now because this is actually giving you stuff that we'll practice next week, but it's in the packet, and right now the level of secrecy is too high. What I want to tell you, because this must be so cryptic, but it's going to be, promise, trust me, it's going to all fall into place. Over the next weeks, we will learn to use these diagrams and 5 permissions to reason together diagrammatically. Now, by diagrammatic reasoning, I mean reasoning which constructs a diagram according to a precept expressed in general terms, performs experiments upon this diagram, notes their results, assures itself that similar experiments performed upon any diagram constructed according to the same precept would have the same result, and expresses this in general terms. We're going to experiment together. Logic distinguishes good and bad inferences. So, to be a good logician, you must commit to being a good person. We're actually going to involve ourselves in an activity of self-improvement, because the phenomena of reasoning are, in their general features, parallel to those of moral conduct. For reasoning is essentially thought that is under self-control, and just as moral conduct is under self-control. Indeed, if you attend to the phenomena of reasoning, although they're not quite so familiar to you as those of morals, you will nevertheless remark that a person who draws a rational conclusion not only thinks this to be true, but thinks that similar reasoning would be just in every analogous case. Hence, we all have in our minds certain norms or general patterns of right reasoning, and we can compare the inference with one of those and ask ourselves whether it satisfies that rule. Logic is the theory of self-controlled or deliberate thought, and as such must appeal to ethics for its principles. Logicians fall off their chair when they hear this one. Logic appeals to ethics. And finally, thus, whenever you replace a bad inference with a good one, you help to make the universe a slightly better place. Indeed, the very being of the general of reason consists in its governing individual events. So then, the essence of reason is such that its being never can have been completely perfected. It always must be in a state of incipiency, of growth. The creation of the universe, which did not take place during a certain busy week in the year of 4004 BC, but is going on today and never will be done, is this very development of reason. Under this conception, The ideal of conduct will be to execute our little function in the operation of the creation by giving a hand toward rendering the world more reasonable whenever, as the slang goes, it is up to us to do so. In logic, it will be observed that knowledge is reasonableness, and the idea of reasoning will be to follow such methods as must develop knowledge the most speedily. This must have been the most cryptic Peirce packet. Now that we haven't seen the logic yet, this must have been the most mysterious one I've ever read to you. Am I right? This must have been like, what even is going on? This must have been so mysterious. The whole while I'm like looking at this from the perspective. Julia, though, must have a completely different experience. Julia, did this make some sense to you? Is this like a mind-blowing gloss on the stuff you've learned? Because Julia's been exposed to this. She knows what this looks like. She knows what we're actually going to do. We're going to experiment on these diagrams and try to reason well and stuff. Right? She would know. And I would know. Julia, did that make sense to you? Was that like a weird take on it? Did you like that? Well, by the way, let's begin our practice. All right, my friends, this is where it all is going to make sense. So you have to always trust me on this journey. Trust is crucial because sometimes certain things have to come before you understand them, and you only understand them in hindsight. So your former self is confused and is passing the baton to your current self. And that current self is about to pass the baton to the future self. And when you look back, your 70th iteration, the runner down the stretch, is going to look back and say, oh, it all makes sense now. So let's begin our practice. Is everyone ready to start this? We're going to enter a whole new world now. We're going to have some fun now. If you're ready, tell me ready. Peirce is an alien. He comes from another planet. We're about to enter the wild and wonderful mind of Charles Peirce. He's like, he lives in another world. All right. My friends, the world is cluttered. Our minds have all sorts of distractions. Most notably, your phones are a distraction. People talking are distractions. Our thoughts are distractions. Can we all agree? Remember when we did precision and phaneroscopy and we went into firstness? I invite all of you to join me into a virtual environment. So I want all of you to put on your VR goggles, and we're going to all put on our VR goggles at the same time, and we're going to come together in a shared environment that will be all white. So put on your VR goggles, everyone. Do you agree? Put on VR goggles, virtual reality goggles, put them on. If you feel like putting them on, say yes. So I want everyone to agree to this. We're going to put on some VR goggles. Put on your virtual reality goggles. All right, you've got them on. Perfect. You're looking up. You're looking down. You're looking to the left. You're looking to the right. You don't see me. You don't see the rest of the class members, but we're all there. Each of us is just seeing one thing. It's white. It's white when you look up. It's white when you look down. You can't see your feet when you look down. It's all white. You remember when we did the purple? Same thing, but with white. And it's right now on the screen. Can everyone confirm that in their VR goggles, they're seeing white? Say yes if you can confirm. You're experiencing that qualia. They're experiencing that quality. Just a white space. It's a white space. Now, if you kept walking, let's say you have kind of a body, I don't know, you can't really see your body, but if you kept walking straight ahead, right, you would see white. And if you kept going backwards, you'd see white, and it would go on infinitely. There is no boundary. So right now, right, on Big Blue Button, we cannot represent this. I don't want this to be yellow. On Big Blue Button, we can't represent this because on Big Blue Button, we have an edge here, all right? But the space I actually want you to be in mentally does not have this edge. It extends in all directions, right? And there is no limit to it. Like, everyone can see my little red dot? Can everyone see my little red dot? You can see my little red dot, say yeah. All right, I'm going to use my hand drag tool, right? And you can imagine I'm going to drag the screen and drag the screen and drag the screen. And if I drag the screen like this for 17 hours from left to right and dragging, what would I see? After 17 hours of dragging it, what would I see? Just white. Just white. Now, you and I still understand each other, right? we've maintained all of the knowledge that we had coming into this virtual space that we've created in order to reason collectively. We want to reason collectively. We want to have a shared space, an arena, if you will, in which we're going to work. And that arena has to be uncluttered. And we've uncluttered it to the absolute maximum. It's something. It's not nothing. There's something there, but that's it, right? But that doesn't mean that we've lost everything. The world is still there. So your pet's still there. You know, your compass card still exists. You know, the eggs in your fridge still exist. All of your knowledge about tomorrow, your memories about yesterday, all of these things are still there. And some of the stuff, like your memories about yesterday, are unique to you. I don't have those memories. You know about that and I don't. But we have a shared knowledge, you and I. Like there's an area of overlap between all of our knowledge, all of the participants in this space right now. We all have a shared knowledge. And we can use that shared knowledge, right? And we can use that shared knowledge by trying to bring it into the space one by one so we don't have clutter. Right now, there's nothing. Do we agree that in some sense this exists? Can we agree? That's undeniable that this exists as a thing, this space right now. In some sense, it's undeniably there. Like deny it, try to deny it. It's there, it's in front of you. So like it's there. So it exists, but it exists, do we also agree, in an unspecified form? Like nothing specific exists, just a vast something, not a particular thing. It has no particularity. It's not specific. So what I'm going to do is I propose to you, just to get started, because I'm going to teach you this system that Peirce taught me, well, actually, that Peirce wrote down, died, was learned by a bunch of other folks who then taught and taught and taught, and eventually it gets to me and it gets to you. I propose that I'm going to now say something. And the sheet right now that we're looking at, this vast sheet of paper with no ripples that extends forever, that is called the sheet of assertion. This space that we're in with our VR goggles is called the sheet of assertion. I'm going to write it right now just so that we know. The sheet of assertion. Why is it called the sheet of assertion? Because anything that finds itself on that sheet is thereby asserted. So let me try to make an assertion now. I want to say that Arthur is coming to the party. Now, for the sake of illustration on Big Blue Button, I want you to understand that I haven't yet asserted this. What I have up here that says Arthur is coming to the party, that's what I'd like to assert. So I'm just going to say it verbally, right? Everyone can hear me. I haven't yet asserted it. Arthur is coming to the party. Let me confirm to all the participants in this shared VR space that that was intelligible. You all understand what I mean when I say Arthur came to the party or Arthur's coming to the party. That we all share English. We all know what parties are. We all understand that Arthur is the name for some guy, right? You all understand this. It's nothing weird, right? You can all understand this. Good. Now, who Arthur is a matter that's outside. We'd have to take out our VR gears to test whether Arthur is in fact coming to the party, right? If this is the thing I want to assert, that Arthur is coming to the party, this is a proposition. It could be true. What would make this true? What would have to be true in the world outside of our VR gear for this claim to be true? What would we have to find in the world once we take out our VR glasses? What would we have to see in order for this claim to be true? So we're done with logic, and we take out our VR gear, and we look out in the world, and we resume ordinary experience. Yeah, John writes, a party with a guy named Arthur at it. Arthur coming, that's right. Someone named Arthur is going to a party, that's right. And if it's a true fact out there in the world, it could reach consensus, right? If all of us took out our glasses, you know this from, when we were looking in epistemology, we could inquire into the matter and we would all come to agree that Arthur is coming to the party, right? And let's say he didn't come to the party, we could also come to agree that that turned out to be false. If all of us sufficiently inquired for all eternity, we would converge on the correct conclusion, on the correct verdict, which would be that this proposition is either true, if Arthur did in fact go to the party, and it would be false if Arthur didn't go to the party. So it can either be true or it can be false, and that requires actual engagement with the world to inquire, Do we agree so far? So far, so good? If everything's clear, say clear. Like you got that part? Figuring out the truth or falsity, that's inquiry, that's science. Like we'd have to do the whole science bit, right? We'd have to go check which party. First of all, we'd have to specify who Arthur is and what party we're looking at, and then yeah, cool, and figure out whether or not he went and so on. In this space, I want us to realize that we can't do that because there's no houses here, there's no party, Arthur can't be seen anywhere. When we're in this space, we're not in a position to inquire into the truth or falsehood of claims. Okay? Clearly, because there's no resources here. Look for Arthur here. Can anyone find Arthur? Look for Arthur in this white space. Can anyone find Arthur? Ariane, I'll get to that in just a second. And if you kept looking north, south, east, west, would you ever find Arthur or a party? Walk, run, explore. All of us, collectively, if we kept looking, we would never, ever, ever find an answer to whether or not this is true or false. We are in an artificial space. Ariana writes, it requires real-world action engagement to be true, right? That's exactly right. In order to figure out the truth or falsehood, we have to remove our goggles. The question of the truth or falsehood of a claim will only be something that we can determine by removing our goggles and putting on our rain boots and going out into the nitty-gritty world out there and actually inquiring, right? No questions about truth or falsehood will be solved in this space. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. We will not be answering questions or truth or falsehood here. Good. Now, you remember that when we all put on our goggles, we all came in with our knowledge, right? We all retained the knowledge that we had. It isn't just because you're looking at a white thing that you become an idiot. It's like, I'm blanking out, prof. I don't remember anything. What's my name? Who's my mother? It's like, you remember all that stuff. It's still there. But you're directing your attention to an artificial space, right? And you remember stuff about the external world out there outside your goggles, right? Outside of the sheet of assertion, the good old world that we know and love. You remember things. And there are certain things you take to be true. And let's say one of us takes to be true. I'll be the one. I'll volunteer. I take this to be true. I believe that Arthur's coming to the party. And I'm referring myself now to the world out there. And I believe that it's true that Arthur's coming to the party. And I'm going to signal to you my commitment to the truth of this, right? I am going to bet, because you have to bet. It's heads or tails. It's either true or it's false. I'm going to bet that this is true, which means, which can be unpacked as, I bet that were we all to remove our goggles and inquire, we would converge on the verdict that this is true, that Arthur really is coming to the party, right? So how am I going to do that? Well, this entire white space is called the sheet of assertion. The moment I write something on it, I commit myself to it. So for instance, like let's say I make a dot here, right? I could have made no dot, but let's say I make a little dot. I made a dot. I did something. There's a kind of a doing that has to be done. On its own, the sheet of assertion is just white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now signal that I assert that Arthur's coming to the party. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to adopt a symbol for this entire proposition, because right now this proposition is expressed in English. There's no real reason why it has to be expressed that way. And I want a much simpler sign for us to manipulate because we're going to experiment. And so I'm going to decide the following convention. I'm going to call Arthur is coming to the party. I'm just going to decide, and you're going to have to agree with me on that convention, to call that A. Do we agree? If you agree to that convention, say agree. And once we've agreed, that's the convention. We'll just call that A. Arthur's coming to the party. We'll just agree to call that A. So if you've all agreed to that convention, let me know. Now, we can't change that convention. We can't change that convention now. Once we agree, if we change the convention, we'll make no more progress. Right? So all of us are going to try to get clear on our ideas. We're going to try to make our reasoning better. We're trying to become Jedis of the mind. And in order to do that, we've developed these tools in front of us that we're going to utilize. If we suddenly decided that A stood for, I don't know, something else, the iced tea tastes terrific. If that's what A stood for, we wouldn't make any progress. Do we agree that if we shifted conventions every time midway just cause, we make no progress. Just like if I decided to say what I mean by a turtle at this time is a zebra, and what I mean by a turtle at the next moment is a cup of coffee, and what I mean by a turtle at the next time is actually a tree, and actually what I mean by a tree is a ruler, that we could never learn about turtles and trees and whatever. Like there'd be no way, right, to track that. Like it'd be the old biblical story of the Tower of Babel, right? It would all be confused. So there's no necessary link, although it is a bit of an icon. I chose A because the word Arthur begins with A. So the sign A here is a bit of an icon, right? But it's nevertheless a symbol. It's A, right? And I could have chosen anything. I could have also said, let me just pick another one. Instead of this, I could have said the following. Let me just erase the A, right? Let me just zoom in a little bit, because we can zoom in as much as we want in the sheet of assertion, as much as we want. Arthur is coming to the party. I'm going to call this Prince. What was that logo that Prince had? That's what I would like to draw. What was the artist formerly known as Prince? What's Prince's symbol? At one point, Prince decided to call himself, I'm looking at it, I just Googled it. I'm going to try to draw it. All right, this is going to be funny. All right, like this, and like this, with an arrow. I don't know if this is I don't know if I'm getting this right. All right, look. The artist formerly known as Prince, right? That's like, I don't know if you know, but like Prince, the musician, had decided to call himself this, right? We could totally agree, we could totally agree to call it. It kind of looks, I don't know what the heck that even is, right? But we agree that if we decided to do that, that would be perfectly fine. It's up for grabs, right? We could say that Arthur is coming to the party. We're going to use this to represent that. Right, that's what it's going to mean. And if we decided to keep that constant, that would be great. Can we all agree? There's nothing specific about the letter A. We could do whatever the hell we want, but so long as all of us have agreed to it and keep that constant, the tool is useful. If everyone sees that there's a part there that's up for grabs, tell me that you understand. So yeah, because we're in a space to get consensus, right? So I just want to make sure there's nothing about the letter A. Let's not get fetishist about letters A, right? Cool. Nevertheless, I don't know about you, but I find it a little harder to remember what this stood for, right? I feel like A is a better convention. It's a little easier on my brain and probably yours, because it's hard to draw the symbol for the artist formerly known as Prince, right? So yeah, I'm just going to stick to A. So we're going to call Arthur is coming to the party. We're going to call that A, right? So that's what I'm going to call this. It's like algebra. It's a variable, can be anything. That's exactly right. So right now on the sheet of assertion, technically I haven't written anything else. This is just what I intend to assert, and for visual purposes, I'm putting it on the board right now. This is what I intend to assert. Right now, actually, with the sheet of assertion looks like this, right? So this is the sheet of assertion. I am now going to scribe. Scribe is the technical term for what it means to insert on the sheet of assertion. Anything that's on the sheet of assertion is thereby asserted. A. What have I asserted by putting this A on the sheet that you can all see? We can all see this A. What have I asserted? Yeah. Importantly, I have scribed A. So Ariana writes, hey, I have scribed A, but I have asserted Arthur's coming to the party. You see that? Yeah. Yeah. I have scribed A, but given the convention that we retain of what that stands for, that means I have committed myself to the idea that he's coming to the party, and I now hold myself responsible to that. Prior to writing this, I was not responsible. There was none of us were responsible for anything. But now I've made myself responsible for that. I've made myself responsible, which means all of you can hold me responsible for this, right? And we can examine it. Let's just confirm everyone can see that this has been scribed on the sheet of assertion. The community of inquirers, can we all converge on that? A has been asserted. It has been scribed on the sheet of assertion. Good. Because, of course, this is going to be a collective thing. We're going to work together on this, right? I have now made an assertion. This is an assertion. Here's another assertion. Let's say me or one of us, I don't care who, wants to assert not just that Arthur's coming to the party, but that Arthur's coming to the party and Betty is coming too. And what I mean by coming to is obviously coming to the party. So you could substitute by coming to the party. Each of these propositions should be able to be read on its own. So what we mean that when we say Betty is coming to, right, we mean Betty is coming to the party, right? So Arthur's coming to the party and Betty is coming to the party. Now that's a very different claim than the claim that Arthur's coming to the party. It's a compound claim. I'm saying two things. I'm saying that Arthur's coming to the party, and I'm saying that Betty's coming to the party too. Now remember, for the sake of exposition, everything that's over here, right, let's say above this line, that's not actually part of the sheet of assertion, but I want to use some visuals just for teaching, right? So technically everything here, that's not part of the sheet of assertion. Now, how would I put this on the sheet of assertion? What would I have to scribe on the sheet of assertion to assert this claim that Arthur's coming to the party and Betty's coming to the party? What would I have to scribe on the surface? A, B. Interestingly, in existential graphs, you don't need anything like this. You don't need anything like this. You don't need anything like this, right? And you just need to put A and B, and the mere fact that they're together, that is the sign that they are conjoined, right? So this is you're looking at a diagram. The icon for conjunction, the icon for the and, the iconic sign of the and, is the mere visual juxtaposition on the sheet of assertion. A is asserted and B is asserted. And notice importantly that I could have also, I could have scribed the following, right? Let's say I do this, B, I need my typewriter to be in black, B, A. It makes no difference where I put these on the sheet of assertion. If I put them, the joint juxtaposition of them, they're there, both of them on the sheet of assertion, no matter how far, no matter how close, means that I have asserted both of these facts. I'm holding myself now responsible to a more demanding situation in the world one where not only Arthur's coming to the party, but Betty is coming too. And I need no extra sign. The sign is an icon. The mere juxtaposition does the work of the and. How do you like that, folks? That's the existential graph symbol, icon actually, not a symbol, for and. Just the mere fact that you put both of them on the sheet. Done. And there's no, I could also have put them, this would be really ugly, right? I could have also have done, I don't have the, right? I don't have a very large, I can't play with my fonts. Same thing, A and B, right? Arthur's coming to the party and Betty is coming too. That is it. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, write clear. If you got a question, write your question. Scale, position, none of that matters. Let's go back just one step, right? If I say Arthur's coming to the party, right now there's nothing on the sheet of assertion, so I'm not responsible for anything. I say A, I scribe A. I make myself accountable for a claim. I'm held responsible. I'm betting that the world is in a certain way. I'm betting that the world is in a way where Arthur's coming to the party. What happens if I do this? What does he think? What do you think that means? It's just a repeat. It's the same bloody thing, right? It's like if I say Arthur's coming to the party, Arthur's coming to the party, Arthur's coming to the party. It doesn't add or take away anything, right? It doesn't change a thing, right? The big shift is compared to when there was nothing. When there was nothing, that was a big move. The transition from nothing to something, that was a big move. Because first of all, I could have said a bunch of stuff. I could have said H, whatever H stands for. I didn't. I said A. So that was a big thing. Plus, the responsibility came into play now. All of a sudden, I'm responsible. I gave the sheet of assertion specificity because I made that particular claim, and I'm making myself responsible for it. But once I've done that, this adds nothing. This doesn't change anything. But if I do this, haha, that's a big deal because now I've scribed another claim. So Arthur's coming to the party could look like this. Arthur's coming to the party and Betty is coming too. This would be a representation in existential graphs of that compound proposition. And I'm holding myself accountable for it, right? And it doesn't matter where the scale and the positioning is. It is a crucial moment when you do or don't have the B. That's absolutely crucial, right? Because you're making that additional claim, right? All right. It is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party. This is called the sheet of assertion, right? And now let's say I want to negate that Arthur's coming to the party, right? Let's say you disagree, right? Reese disagrees and Reese wants to say, no, Arthur is not coming to the party. Not. He wants to negate this, right? Normally in logic, you do what Reese just wrote. Can everyone see? You do tilde A. You do this little wiggly line A, right? But we're not going to do that in existential graphs because that's symbolic logic and we're working with a weirdo in diagrammatic logic. We're into the mind of an alien who thinks very differently from us. So that's not how we're going to represent that. How are we going to do this? Would you use another letter? Would you use C? X? No. We're going to use an icon. You're proposing symbols. So Reese, Ariana, Andrew, and Owen have all proposed symbols. We're going to use an icon. We have an icon of assertion right now on the screen. What's the icon of assertion? What's the iconic sign of assertion? What is the stand-in for what it means to claim that something exists? It's the sheet of assertion. That's the icon of assertion. The mere fact that something is here, right? Here's the sheet of assertion. Let's put it fully blank, right? This is the sheet of assertion. That's the icon of what it means to assert. So what would be the icon of negate? If this sheet means assert, what do you think would be the icon of negate? What would be the equivalent sign of not assert? I'm gonna grab some scissors. I'm gonna cut a space. I'm gonna cut out a space in the sheet. So everything here, that's asserted. If everything here is asserted, right? Let me just use another color for that. Right? If everything in this pink space is asserted, right? What happens inside the space? If I have agreed that everything on the sheet of assertion will be asserted and I cut out a space exempt from the sheet of assertion, what happens if I put A over here? Let me just undo this space over here. Let me do that. It won't be asserted. You got it. John, you got it. I cut a space on the sheet of assertion and I write something in the sheet of assertion. Since we've understood that the sheet of assertion precisely consists in asserting, when I cut a space from it, I hereby negate that thing. So, for instance, if you want to say it's not the case that Arthur is coming to the party, what you do is you do what's called a cut and then negate what? You can't negate unspecifically, like I negate. Don't what? Like not what, right? You have to not something, you have to don't something. I negate A. This is the existential graph's representation of the assertion that it is not the case that Arthur's coming to the party. And we read these things from the outside in. You and I, and I'm going to use another color every time I'm doing a kind of a meta language here or a meta signs. You and I are on the outside, all of us. We're all on the outside looking in. The outside, the sheet of assertion is the primary place where we stand, if you will, with our feet, or non-existent feet in this case, right? And we're looking at this and we recognize this cut as a cut, right? We realize that there's a transition there, and we can see inside the cut. We can see this content. So all of us can understand this to mean it is not the case that A. I hereby not assert A, I negate A. And if you want to take some crack cocaine and read Peirce on this, Peirce thought that what actually is happening is there's a mirror universe where the polar opposite you, like a photographic negative, is actually asserting that Arthur is coming to the party, and you're looking at each other from across a mirror universe. Just so you know, the man took drugs, and it's a wild idea. It's completely cool. Because if you think about it, right, you could assert something and you could deny something. And if you take the coulds seriously, Peirce thought that there's a sense in which the could exists. There's a you out there that negates this. And there's a you out there that asserts it. And you're looking at each other from different perspectives, if you will, on this shared space, another possible world. What's my position on that? It's not as crazy as it seems. And if we did metaphysics together, Reese did metaphysics with me. You remember David Lewis? There's good reasons. There's good arguments for that. Yeah, it's not as crazy as it seems. Just so you know, these things they just seem crazy for the first 25 seconds. And after 25 years, you're like, they're not as crazy. But that's all optional. That's sort of a metaphysical reading. It is not the case that Arthur's coming to the party. Is that clear so far? If it's clear, write clear. If you got a question, ask your question. This is what it looks like to say it is not the case that Arthur's coming to the party. Good. Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Who wants to volunteer to try to draw this in existential graphs? Say yes if you want to volunteer. All right, Ariana, let's let Ariana draw. Ariana, take your time. Look in the toolbar. You should have something that looks like a shape. So if you click on the thing that has a little pencil, you should have something that looks like shapes. You have your pencil and you have your typewriter, and you also have colors. Ariana, try to draw that. Again, I'm making an experiment here. Now Ariana's in charge. Ariana's going to try, and take your time. There's no rush, especially since we're trying this. Ariana is going to try to represent Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Ariana, type in the chat bar when you're done. You got it. You got it, Ariana. That was so cool. You did amazing. So that bodes well for today, because remember, I'm going to get you involved. I know you were nervous. So super applause. Like, this is so cool. All right, I'm giddy now because it looks like it's going to work. It's only going to work if we do one person at a time, obviously. So Ariana is in our shared virtual reality space, right? And Ariana has now made this compound assertion, right? This compound claim that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Is that clear, everyone? She got it right. And you can see why it's intuitive, right? She was able to figure this out on her own. If it's clear, type in clear. If you got a question or comment, type your question or comment. And later on over the next weeks, what we're going to do is, to get moving, remember we said we need premises. You need the raw stuff. There has to be some stuff you take to be true for us to start tracing the relations between them. Let's say one of us takes this to be true. Then we're going to start playing with these diagrams to figure out what follows from them or not, right? And it's going to be fun because we're going to do this together. It is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty is coming to the party, which colloquially would mean it is not the case that Arthur and Betty are coming to the party. But just to be clear, we understand the claim A here, right, to mean not just Arthur, because Arthur is not a claim. Like Arthur, true or false, that's not a claim. What we mean by Arthur is coming to, the party, blah, 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 right? Arthur is coming to the party. So the same claim as we saw earlier. right? And we want to say it is not the case that Arthur and Betty are coming to the party. It is not the case that Arthur and Betty are coming to the party. Who wants to volunteer to try to draw that one? All right, John, you got dibs. All right, so John's going to go for it. John, once again, you got your toolbar on the right. You can figure that out. When you click on the letter, you're going to have little tools for shapes. You have also colors if you want to change the color. Normally we do all this in black, but who cares? Oh, looking good, looking good. It is not the case that Arthur and Betty are going to the party. Tell me when you're done in your chat bar. You got it. That's exactly right. John deserves another round of applause. Amazing stuff, right? Let's go, John. That's right. And look at what, it is not the case that, what are we denying, right? What we're denying, what we said earlier. So earlier when we said, let's go back here. When we said that, let me clear that and make it a little neater, that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty is coming to the party, the diagram looked like this. If I say it's not the case that I want to negate that, then the negation consists in precisely making sure that it shows up in a cut and not on the sheet of assertion. And that's exactly what John did, right? It is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty is coming to the party, which colloquially is as the formulation above. So you got it. Now, look at how one of the virtues of this is, if you've taken logic, right, before, so many conventions have to be in place because it's symbolic logic. And symbols work on convention. So the very first weeks of class just consist in you soaking up so many conventions. The system that we're using at right now has some conventions. A stands for Arthur's coming to the party. B stands for Betty is coming to the party. Those are symbols, but it also has icons. And icons work by similarity with whatever it is they represent. In this case, they're representing logical relations. And right now we have two logical relations. The logic, actually three things. We have assertion, which is represented by the mere fact of being. So you might say, as far as signs go, right, we can catalog what we have so far, right? The mere fact of showing up stands for assertion. The mere fact of showing up stands for assertion, which if you think about it, it's a tremendously appropriate icon. Hey, it showed up. I take something to be true and I'm going to present it in front of you as proof that it's true. So that's the icon of what it means to assert, right? The mere fact of showing up, of let's say, showing of juxtaposition, let's say, juxtaposition stands for conjunction. The mere fact of juxtaposition stands for conjunction, right? And then a cut from the sheet of assertion stands for negation. So what we have here are icons. The fact of showing up standing for an assertion, that's an iconic sign. Juxtaposition is an iconic sign of conjunction. And a cut from the sheet of assertion is an icon of negation, which is why just a few minutes in, without much learning, you don't need to learn conventions for all this stuff, right? If you were to do logic, what would be the sign for conjunction? Those of you who've done logic, what's the symbol for conjunction? And we're going to use the word symbol in the strict sense of requiring a convention. Type in the chat bar, what's the symbol you learned for conjunction? Yeah, Andrew took some logic with me. It looked like this, depending on the prof you get, it's that. What about negation? We saw earlier, what's the symbol for negation? Yeah. So those of you who have never taken logic before, if you were taking symbolic logic, you'd have to learn all of these little Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? You'd have to commit them to memory and learn all these conventions. The reason why already 2 students were able to figure out without the professor telling them what it would look like is because this is more arguably intuitive because it's using iconic signs. It is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Ooh, who wants to volunteer for that? Arjun. All right, Arjun, and before you do, I'm going to give you one piece of suggestion, right? Remember that it is not the case that negates this entire thing, right? So it is not the case that is what it's negating is the entire contents of this square bracket. So it might be helpful for you to just begin by representing the square bracket before negating it. So that's the hint I give you. Arjun, you're on, you take your time. When you're done, you type in the chat bar that you're done. Cool. All right. Now Papa Bear is going to come and we're going to fine tune this because you're learning a skill, right? The first thing to note is, and I'm writing in purple now, right? Is this here, that's a kind of a minus sign. We don't have that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this minus sign or whatever that was. It could have been just an accident as you were writing, but we don't want that. That's not a thing. So we're going to remove it, right? Also, by the way, you've got the little toolbars. I know they're really hard to get. No problem, no problem. And Arjun, if there's one class where making mistakes is okay, it's a Peirce class, right, Arjun? Like, I mean, the whole gospel of this entire class has been, yeah, it's been like, that's how we grow. Now, what is Arjun's diagram actually saying? It's not quite saying what we were trying to say. It's saying something else. Write in English in the chat bar what Arjun's diagram is saying. It's not saying the same thing. Someone else, not Arjun. Read his diagram and tell me what it's actually asserting. Not quite, Reese. Folks, try again. And again, we'll like aiming for the star. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Let's just keep working together. Vera's got it, right? Look at Vera, what she wrote. It is not the case that Arthur is not coming to the party and Betty is, right? So we're working our way from the outside in all the time because that's where we're standing, right? So let's read this from the outside in. First of all, it's going to start with it is not the case because what's the first thing that we encounter when we work from the outside in? It's a cut. The first thing we encounter when we work from the outside in is a cut. So we know that this is going to be negating something. What is it going to be negating? It's going to be negating the entire contents within the cut. Okay, fine. Let's remove some clutter here. What are the entire contents within the cut? Let me erase a bunch of stuff so that we can actually see the entire contents within the cut more clearly. So let me just erase all of this meta stuff that I just put, and let's look at what's within the cut. And let's even erase this for a second. It's fun to be in the shared space of the sheet of assertion. What is this saying? Yeah, you're all converging on the right interpretation. That's right. Arthur is not coming and Betty is, right? So Arthur is not coming. So you'll see over here on the left, right? Arthur is not coming and Betty is. And the and you get for free just by the fact that both are there on the sheet of assertion, no matter how close, no matter how far. Now, suppose I take a cut, right? I'm going to stick with red just because that's the color that Arjun picked, right? Suppose I take a cut and I cut out all of this. That's essentially like saying it is not the case that, and then copy paste what you just wrote. So what would that yield? It is not the case that, and then that Arthur is not coming to the party, and Betty is. Yeah. So Vera, if you look back, look at what Vera wrote. She got it right. It is not the case that Arthur is not coming to the party and Betty is. Look at what Vera wrote in the chat bar. Look at what's on the screen. Can we agree there's a match between what Vera wrote in normal language and between the graphs that we have on the screen? Can everyone see that? Confirm if you can see that. If you can't, I'll spell it out in English. I'll write it out in English right now. Right. Owen can't see that. All right, so let me see. It is not the case that. Let's start there. All right. It is not the case that. That's that cut over here. Right? It is not the case that what? It is not the case that the entire contents of the cut. What are the entire contents of the cut? The entire contents of the cut are that Arthur isn't coming. Arthur is not coming, right? Because that's in a circle, right? It's not coming. He's not coming, right? And so Arthur is not coming. This here thing, Arthur is not coming, okay? That's represented by this. Arthur is not coming. And you get the and for free because of this is juxtaposed, right? And Betty is coming. And Betty is coming. Where is that? That's over here. Can you see that more clearly? Owen, Ariana, whoever couldn't see it perfectly, can you see that more clearly? Yeah, and that's what we're going to work through this. It's no big deal, right? Again, I don't want anyone, if you're not 100% clear, just flag it and we'll just take our baby steps into this, right? It is not the case that Arthur is not coming and Betty is coming. In English, we might say like, yet Betty is coming or something like that, or but Betty is coming. Those are stylistic variations, right? It is not the case that Arthur is not coming. Let me pause and hear from everyone. Is that clear? Can everyone see how the graph above models the claim below? If it's clear, write clear. If you got a question, say your question. Good. All right, so now let's erase all of this. All right, and this was the graph that someone originally tried, right? But the original passage that we wanted to do wasn't quite the same claim. What was the claim that we wanted to model? It was, it is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't, which is why I anticipated there might be an issue. And remember, my piece of advice was, start by doing this and then negate all of that. Remember that piece of advice? So let's actually follow that piece of advice. Let's just model this first, right? Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Let's just model that first. Who wants to go for it again? Someone else. Nav. All right, Nav, you've got the floor. All right. Try to use your tools. They're a little neater. Just take the time to get to know them. We'll play with them for the next few weeks. Reese, get out of there. We see you. Move out of there. Thank you. Go for it, Nav. Just do Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. Just do that first. So far, so good. Betty isn't coming to the party. I'm going to narrate. And Arthur is coming to the party. And now bring it home, Nav. Negate the whole thing. It's not the case that. You got it. And when you're done, type in done on the chat bar. I'll disable your tools. Perfect. Beautiful. Nav, was that stressful? No, wow, you're one cool cucumber. Nav, you get a round of applause too, folks. Nav totally deserves some love, right? That's like totally cool. Wow. I'm having a good time, by the way. You folks are doing so cool. You see that there's a difference now, right? We're modeling this claim well. It is not the case that Arthur's coming to the party and Betty isn't. Yes, you need the two circles, of course, because if you don't, what you're going to end up with is this. Andrew, what does this say? Remember, the sheet of assertion is we're working from the outside in. Whatever's on the sheet is asserted. Why can't B just be outside the circle? Well, here's what would happen. Let's try that. An A inside. Suppose we try that. So let's try that, right? Let's imagine that instead of this, again, I'm going to have some fun. What if I did this? There's nothing wrong with each of these graphs. It's just the question is, are they actually modeling what we wanted to model? Is it representing what we want to model, right? If I say this, Andrew, suppose I put a B and the B is not in any enclosed space. What is my view on Betty coming to the party? Do I think that Betty is coming or she ain't coming? If it turns out on the sheet of assertion itself, not a cut space, she's coming. All right. And it's probably the good time to introduce this. So let's go back to Arthur for a second. Let's go back to good old, our smallest proposition that we had. Arthur's coming to the party. Let's go back to that. It's a good time to introduce it. I can see why this is causing Andrew's concern. I'm asserting that Arthur's coming to the party. Andrew, do you agree? I think he ain't coming. Do you agree? As in, not do you agree that he's not coming, but do you agree that that's the right thing? I don't think it's true that he's not coming. What does this mean, Andrew? What do you think this means in symbolic logic? Because Andrew's taking advanced symbolic logic with me. What would that mean? That means that Arthur is coming in virtue of which inference rule? You got it. Arthur's coming in virtue of double negation. Well, guess what, Andrew? We have a rule in the system called double cut, right? I'm essentially saying that Arthur's coming to the party, right? Okay, according to this graph, do I think Arthur's coming or not coming? Do I think he's coming or not coming? Exactly. And one of the cool things is going to be when we start playing with these things is there's going to be a rule that permits you to do the following. There's going to be a rule that says if you have an empty double cut, you are entitled to erase it. You're entitled to do this. You're entitled to erase. That's not what I want to do. I want to use the my pen. Hold on. You're entitled to erase the double cut around it. Because to say not A just is the same as saying A. Not A is the same as A, right? So now let's go back to this now that we've made this nice clarification. It is not the case that Arthur is coming to the party and Betty isn't. So let's do this again. I'm going to do the diagram, the diagram again for this, right? Arthur is coming to the party. Betty's coming to the party. Oops, that's way too fat. Arthur's coming to the party and Betty's coming to the party. Arthur's coming to the party and Betty is not coming to the party. It's not the case that Arthur's coming to the party and Betty isn't coming to the party. Andrew, does that start starting to cement a bit more? Can everybody else, can you see that? And if I did this, wait, I'll wait to see what Andrew writes, but I'm going to have some fun again just to show you. It makes sense, but isn't the whole second hole just a break and the negation bigger than a circle? Isn't the whole second hole just breaking? All right. So let's go here. We're all on the outside. We're looking in. This line asserts, this pink line. Everyone, we agree? We're on the space of assertion. Do we agree? Say if you agree. This line is this little comment. I'm making a comment, a love comment, a gem and the holograms comment. We're still on assertion space. Do we agree? We're on assertion territory. We're doing a geography of assertion and negation here. We're still on Canadian soil. We're still on assertion. Agreed? All right. Once I get here, what's happening? On what soil am I now with the dotted line? My dotted comment. Am I on assertion space or negation space? Good. And when I get here again and it becomes full, what am I on? What space? Assertion space or negation space? Assertion. And here, this next dotted line, I'm on assertion or I'm on negation, and then I resume. One of the things we can't do that I do in my homework for you is that it's nice, and I do this in class, to shade these things. So one of the things that's nice is if you can shade these things, and I don't have a shading tool here, I just have some gray, right? It would look like this. You shade the inside of the cut. Actually, let me give myself my little boundary. Or, you shade the inside of the cut space, right? And that way what that does is it gives you a reminder of what terrain you're on. And of course, as soon as you make another cut, you're going to be shifting that polarity, right? So for instance, if I do another cut around here, let me make sure I do that right. If I do another cut around here to capture the proposition above, right, I'd have to redo the shading because now the situation would be different. It would have to look like this. This would have to go back to being white, right? All of this would have to go back to being white. I'm messing up my B a lot. I'll redo it. All of this would have to go back to being white. Let me redo my circle. And luckily, I've gotten okay adept at doing these Moodle tools, right? Again, sorry for the messiness here, right? And I'd have my B. Oopsie, I want my tool for writing. Thank you. I have my B here for Betty is not coming, right? And then which area would I have to shade in gray now? So let me give you some numbers just to work on. 1, 2, or 3. Which area should I actually technically shade? 1, 2, or 3? Exactly. So in the homeworks I'll give you next week, right, I actually use that visual aid because it's clearer. It's much clearer, right? And so that's what you end up with here, is this shaded area over here. It gets a little messy if you do this on Big Blue Button, but Big Blue Button is cool now because we can actually collaborate together, and that's a great trade-off because we get to work collectively and converge on these conclusions that we reach, right? So there you go. Does that clarify? So Andrew says, so what I'm saying is you could pick up 3 and move it to 1 and be left with 1 bubble. No, you can't, because the rule of double negation that we just saw a moment ago has to be an empty double cut space. And there's A in here that would prevent you from applying it. So you're looking ahead to next week, Andrew. Yeah, the A would prevent you to do that. There's an A there that prevents you from doing it. Yeah. No, it wouldn't maintain the truth. It would not. Work that out in symbolic logic for yourself if you want. It wouldn't. It would screw you up. It would alter it. Yeah. So you're looking ahead at inferences. We're not there, Andrew. We're not there yet. Yeah, no problem, no problem. Which is good. I'm happy for that, but it's just a little step ahead. All right, this is a hard one. And again, I'm looking at the clock. We're doing okay. We're going to gently begin to wrap up. I just wanted to give you a flavor of this stuff. So far, I just want to check with everyone. Is this fun? Is this starting to look more real to you now than the cryptic, mysterious reading we read? Right? Just want to check in with everyone. John says, yeah, I just want to, because I told you, go with me on this. It's going to go places. This reading will be mysterious at first, but it'll go places. John answered, just want to make sure everyone following along, enjoying it, cool. Checking in with my peeps, because I can't read your body language. I got no signs from you. Emit signs. Thank you. All right, this one's going to be harder. Who wants to volunteer for this one? Someone new if you're brave. Either Arthur is coming to the party or Betty is coming to the party. And I'm going to give you a clarification here, right? This is read as an inclusive or. So we're going to see. John can try, right? Actually, I think I'll do it because it's probably too hard, right? We read the or here because there's an or. We're going to read this as an inclusive or. And what that means is at least one of the following. Sorry, I ran out of space. At least one of the following is the case. At least one. I didn't give myself enough space. At least one of the following is the case. All right. That's what the inclusive or means, right? So at least one of the following, there should be a one, not on. At least one of the following is the case. Either Arthur is coming to the party or Betty is coming to the party. I'll actually do that one for you because it's going to be a little too hard otherwise. And I'm looking at the clock and there's a few other things I want to look at. When I say that at least one of the following is the case, I'm saying there's one scenario you are for sure not going to see in the world. Tell me in plain English what that scenario would be. When I make the claim that at least one of the following is going to happen, at least one of the following, what scenario in the world am I ruling out? Reese, you got it. That neither comes, that both are no-shows, right? Now, what would it mean that both are no-shows, both don't come? It would mean, right, that Arthur is not coming to the party. That's not Arthur coming to the party. And it would mean that Betty, right, is not coming to the party. So what this means is Arthur is not coming to the party and Betty is not coming to the party. Both are no-shows. Neither comes. They won't both happen. And when I say that at least one of the following is the case, I'm essentially saying that at minimum, one of them is going to show up. And if at minimum, one of them is going to show up, you're never going to get this situation. That's the graph for the proposition above, the inclusive or. That's the graph for inclusive disjunction. Either Arthur is coming to the party or Betty is coming to the party. The graph for that is you'll never have a situation where Arthur is not coming to the party and Betty is not coming to the party. That's the graph. That was a harder one. John, you're Monday morning quarterback, but do you think you would have gotten it? This one's a little trickier. You're free to say you could have, right? We'll all grant you that. That one's a little trickier, but it's an icon of inclusive disjunction. Yeah, close but not exact. That's fair enough. And there's a way in which, this is one of the cool things about existential graphs. If you studied symbolic logic, meditating on this image will give you a better intuitive appreciation of the nature of disjunction, the nature of or, what it means to say or. And again, there's no additional sign for or. We haven't added any additional signs. Notice that what we have so far. We have the mere fact of showing up that stands for assertion, the mere fact of juxtaposition that stands for conjunction, and the cut from the sheet of assertion that stands for negation. And so far we've expressed conjunction, and we've expressed negation, not. We've expressed disjunction. We can also express conditionals. We can also express all sorts of other logical relations. I don't know why this is stalling on me. I should be able to see something. There we go. All right, hold on. My slides are just taking a little longer to load. Don't know why. Hey, what's up with you? All right, there you go. If Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. This is an if-then compound proposition. If this happens, then this happens. I'll tell you right away how to represent this, and we can pick up next week and unpack this a bit more. But once again, if I say that if Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink, I'm essentially saying the following. Let's imagine a situation where the boat doesn't sink. And Jerry got on the boat. This is a depiction of a world right now. It's a world in which Jerry got on the boat and the boat didn't sink. When I say that, if Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink, I'm essentially saying, right, that I deny that this will ever be the case. I deny that there's ever a situation where Jerry gets on the boat and the boat doesn't sink. So this is the existential graph representation of if then. If J, then S. If Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. That's what it looks like. And again, if I had to shade it, and I will for the homework starting next week, the shading would look like this. I would start, sorry, I want to use my pencil here. I'd start shading this area over here. That's the if then. You can meditate on that if you want, right? That's the representation. Again, I could have you figure that out, but if you've never taken logic before and we haven't had conversations about if then claims, that's probably a little trickier. But what we have is if something, then something. And if you would, this is what Peirce often called a scroll. And you have the antecedent. If you've done some logic before, I'll just use some logic language for a moment. The antecedent is here and the consequent is here. If then. And there's no real reason why it has to have the orientation that it does, obviously, right? It could look like this. Sorry, I'm going to mess around with the colors here because I don't want to take the time to do it, right? It would look like this, S and J. There you go, right? If Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. There's no particular location that we can put, a scale, size, all that stuff, doesn't matter. My friends, is that clear? If it's clear enough, just write clear. Again, we're nearing the end. Just clear enough, say write clear. Otherwise, we'll move on. Good. All right. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff that we're going to be doing next week. You get the flavor of it, right? If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will sink. I'll do another one for you, just so you can see it. If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will sink. I don't know why my lines are so fat right now, but they're not supposed to be. T. Tom, and if Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will sink. Here, there are two conditions that need to be met. If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will sink. That's just the same as saying there's no situation where Tom gets on the boat and Jerry gets on the boat and the boat doesn't sink, right? And by putting a large circle over the whole thing, I showed that I denied. That's exactly right, Ariana. I create a space that's cut from the sheet of assertion. And so anything in the cut space is being denied. You got it. That's exactly right. All right. Saying that Superman is presently in Metropolis is equivalent to saying that Clark Kent is presently in Metropolis, right? What would that look like? I'll show you right away. We'll revisit these things next week, right? But just so you know that we have full coverage of all of the logical relations that we need, this is what it would look like. This is the diagram for equivalence, is equivalent to saying. This entire thing is saying what? Well, we're on the outside reading in, right? So on the sheet of assertion, we're asserting two negations. We're negating two things. We're negating that there could ever be a situation where Superman is there and Clark Kent isn't. And we're also negating that there could ever be a situation where Superman is there and Superman isn't. None of those things are ever going to happen because where Superman goes, Clark Kent follows. And where Clark Kent goes, Superman follows. So saying that Superman is presently in Metropolis is equivalent to saying that Clark Kent is presently in Metropolis. That's the existential graph representation of the claim above. I'm glad you like it, Owen. I'm glad. And again, because we're doing this. So why are we doing this? So this is like, why in the world are we doing this? Isn't it simpler to use language? You might be wondering, and I suppose some of you might be wondering this right now. Like, why are we making our lives so much more complicated? Honestly, tell me if you've been wondering this at this point. I mean, you really should be, right? Like, why? If English is so simple, why are we using these different signs to say in such convoluted manner, right? All right, here's why. If I take his pawn, then he will either take my knight or he will move his bishop. If he takes my knight, then I will be angry, but his queen will be exposed. If he moves his bishop, then my queen will be exposed. That said, if I don't take his pawn, then my queen will be exposed. Anyway, now, at the very least, I'm going to take his pawn or I'm not going to take it. So either his queen or mine will be exposed, right? This is the conclusion of this argument. Either his queen or mine will be exposed. Folks, you got 30 seconds. Does this conclusion follow from the premises? I can't show you this video, and I'll show you next week. I want to show you a bunch of macaque monkeys, right? And I wanted to make the point that we're just monkeys. And essentially, one slightly less dumb animal has taught his fellow animals a new habit, and that's what I'm going to pass along, this cool little trick. And I wanted to say some bigger stories about where all that fits in, his picture of logic, and just wrap that up, just a couple minutes more. But hey, I can't even get my final slide. You know what you got to do, people. If you can hear me and we're done, say goodbye. You write your entries. And sorry for this, but if something we've learned in this philosophy course is that things F up. And next time, I think I'll delete all the stuff we do on the slides together so that it doesn't backlog. I think Big Blue Button's kind of like trying to keep it all. Let's say goodbye. And thank you for we did great today. I'm excited about next week because we're going to practice this stuff more with the shared screen. Thank you. Have a great week, folks. You did great today. And thanks to Andrew and Ariana and everybody else who tried. Thank you. Have an amazing week as well.
Yeah, this is Andrew. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Take care.
Take care, John. Bye, Julia. Bye, Hannah.